Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. We are joined today by Ashok Vashist, the founder and CEO of WTI. Thank you so much for coming to the show today. Before we start, let's give our listeners a little bit of your background for some context, please.
So, thank you very much, Mike, for having me on the show. Talking about myself, I think I'd been only working in the mobility industry since the time I started working. That is from '95, working with some of the large corporate in India, whether it was Transport Corporation of India, and then with ITC, Indian Tobacco Company, and launched some radio taxi concepts in the country. And in 2009-10, took the plunge after working for almost 15, 16 years and started WTI cabs. So this was completely a bootstrapped venture when we started. So we were three of us, me, Vivek, and Hema, who were the founding crew of this particular ship, and started absolutely without much of funds, without anything. It was the sheer grit which was more important than having any of the investments, etc., etc. And today I certainly believe that if you are determined to do something, I think for sure you'll be able to, provided you have the same kind of grit throughout the journey, and you have to maintain that always, because there are always peaks and valleys when it comes to business. There were times, yeah.
What made you want to start a cab company? What is it, like almost now 16 years ago, yeah?
Yeah, but Mike, I had been only working in this segment and I had no experience of any other business. And this is the only thing that I know. So there's nothing else I could have done.
But was it like a gap you were trying to fill? Like, there must have been other taxi companies. And even 2009, I'm trying to think, because the iPhone came out in 2007, which feels like 400 years ago now.
Yeah.
But was there like a technological gap you were trying to fill? Because you were in this business already. Did you see something you thought you could do better? Like what was the deal?
So one thing is that it was not trying to fill the gap. Primarily, the first thing was that itch was there to do something on your own. Okay, that, and then you try and find out the purpose as to what is that you're supposed to do. So this all aggregation that is happening now on the model which Uber or some of the aggregators are working was something which was discovered by us in 2001, 2002, when I used to be working with various corporate. But then it was never implemented. And that's the gap which I thought, because when you have to scale up the model, it is very important that you have to have an entrepreneurial model. And until unless you have that kind of a model, you'll not be able to scale up. So I actually, let me praise myself. I actually mastered the art of implementing this model of driver come owner, where a driver will come and attach his car with you, and we are able to generate business, and they will be implementing, they'll be driving on the road, and both the parties will be doing their part, so that there is some kind of a balance which is maintained. Otherwise, what used to happen is any corporate who has more than 300 or 400 vehicles, they used to get into a serious problems, and that serious problem used to be IR issues or HR issues. And I'd like to remind you one more thing. Across the world, when you talk about any government agencies running state transport authorities, for example, in all the countries, the government has some say in running the state transport authorities. They are most of the time loss making. Most of the 95%. And that is because there is no entrepreneurial instinct in that business. And it is very entrepreneurial in nature when you talk about cab service or you talk about transportation, because till today, till such time that we come with the vehicles which are autonomous vehicles, there'll be one person who will be driving it, and you'll have to ultimately depend on his whims and fancies and whatever.
So what do you think is going to happen when autonomous vehicles come? Because they will come, right? And they'll definitely come in India, and they'll come all over India. How does it change? Because this idea of aggregating drivers, right, and have them be the owners, Because I think that here's what's going to happen. I think that wealthier people are going to buy fleets. You're going to buy 7 cars, 10 cars, 12 cars, whatever it is, and run them autonomously all day. And if they need their own drive or ride during the day, they'll just hire one of their own for free.
Correct.
Drive around. They'll send them out to a parking station somewhere outside of the main part of a city or a town, and then they'll bring them back in. But what's your vision for the way this is going to happen?
Okay, so let's break it up in 2 parts. One is the global scenario, because we are operating in Dubai and now we'll be starting in London also. So in those part of the world, the autonomous cars will come earlier than what we will find in India.
Sure.
And the reason is infrastructure, especially within the cities, because to run autonomous car, it is very important. The signages, etc., has to be very, very proper, because there is some AI which is working, because Intel is inside. What in case of driver-driven cars, there's an idiot outside, but in case of autonomous car, though there is an Intel inside, but there has to be some system in place so that it can read and accordingly it can work. So India, it might take some time, and also at the same time, the policymakers will not allow this to happen very soon. It is a matter of losing millions and millions of jobs. So it will take time in India. Whereas in rest part of the world, where the driver cost constitutes around 51% to 59% of the cost, there it might happen soon.
You're thinking about a place like Dubai, where the roads are pristine, the signage is amazing, they're very technologically oriented.
So
do you think it's going to happen there sooner?
Yeah, they're already testing it. If you talk about any of these cities, or you talk about American cities, or you talk about London, possibly there you can find these cars more appropriate. However, in the developing nations, it will take some time, and specifically because of the employment reasons, and secondly, it can be because of the infrastructure reason. Now, talking about the other point that you mentioned, that somebody will buy 10 cars, 20 cars, that model actually has already started coming in. And now I'll tell you how.
Tell me, yeah.
We started this so-called DCO model in 2001, 2002, where the driver becomes the owner. Initially, see, every business model has got a time period. And I have a strong feeling that this model has lived up to its life.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
So you think it's done?
It is done, and I'll
tell me
why. The reason I'm saying this is because they don't really. When I talk about chauffeurs, they don't really take care of the quality of the car. They don't take care of the customer. That feeling of customer service is not there, and just by paying, let's say, $100 or $200, they're getting a car. So they don't have the skin in the game. Initially, when we started this model of so-called driver cum owner, we used to take a significant amount as a deposit. Tomorrow, if he does anything wrong, or the most important is there is skin in the game. So the guy is disciplined. There has to be some amount of training. There has to be some amount of autocracy as far as when it comes to service delivery. Even if you look at hotel industry, I think the general manager in any hotel is like a general. Whereas here, moment you hand over a car, it is just not in your control.
So what's going to replace it?
So there'll be a balance between DCO and the large companies who are owning the fleet. For example, today we have a fleet of 12,000 or 15,000 cars. The companies like Uber, etc., and some aggregators will come to us and they will take cars from us.
Interesting. How would that work, though? So here's some feedback that I'll give you. From my own experience, I don't have a car. I don't think I'll ever buy a car again, because I don't think I'll ever want to deal with the maintenance or the hassle or whatever. And it's so inexpensive where I live to order a car or order a motorbike. It's just way easier. But the inconsistency in the quality of the drive and the ride is just so inconsistent. Yeah. In the sense that I can get into a super nice car that's super clean, or I can get into a super dirty car that frankly doesn't even smell nice.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem. So if you own 12,000 cars, What would the relationship, the commercial relationship be, and how would it work between WTI and let's say Uber and Ola? Like, do you know what I mean? How does it work? Who gets paid? Where does the commission go? Like all that stuff. How does it work?
See, what will happen is today, in today's environment, managing a workforce of 1 million or 2 million drivers across is just difficult.
It's hard.
It is horrible, and you have no control. I'm talking about all the app based aggregators, very large across.
Yeah.
Now, even the cost really goes up when you're managing and talking to these 2 million, 3 million people in one country. So what they've decided is the asset has to be owned by a company whereby they are controlling these people. So there is a phase to the service delivery, and that's what is required. And especially in the premium service, when you talk about Uber Black or the premium service offered by Uber or the app aggregators, so that's how they will have some control on the service. For example, here the drivers will not be the owners of the vehicle. They'll be getting their certain salaries based on how many kilometers or how many trips they're driving. So every day they will come to the hub, take a car, which is a clean car, do their number of trips, and return the car to the hub. Then the second driver takes the same car, he does his perform his duties, and return the car to the hub. That's how it is going to work, and this way there'll be some control on the quality, also in terms of safety as well. So going forward, I think this is the model, and there'll be a balance between 50% of cars will be aggregated from the DCOs, and 50% cars will be aggregated from the large companies. And specifically, when I talk about the luxury end.
Yeah. So it depends in which sector you're going to be operating. The luxury sector makes complete sense to me, right? Because you're basically hiring a chauffeur now. And that's just like having a traditional, what we used to call in New York and probably in LA as well, like a livery car service. Now it's just one with technology associated with it. Those guys,
exactly,
in most cases, didn't own those cars. The company did. They pulled a salary. And it was very clear how the company made money. But if there are two companies involved, right? So like if you're managing all of these people, because now you say you have 12,000 cars, but you could literally in India have 100 million cars. I mean, at some point, right?
Yeah.
Or 10 million cars or 20 million cars, just because the country is so vast. But even in a place like Dubai, you could have 25,000 cars there, right? And sort of all of the UAE.
Correct.
But then how does Uber, just as an example, make money? And then how does WTI make money and still have enough to go around? Because now two companies have to get paid. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how that works.
Uber is a technological platform. So, as far as technology is concerned, they will be taking their part 10% or 20% on the ride. Let's say the value is $100, they'll take 20 or 15 depending on how large or how small the ride is, and there'll be different configurations because once the service becomes valuable to all the customers, after that there is a component of 80 to 85% which will come to operators like us. From this, the game is of economies and how well you are able to utilize your asset. So here, because the asset is not owned by Uber, here it will be us who will have to ensure that the asset is utilized at least for 20 hours or 22 hours a day with two different drivers. The more asset is utilized, the better you'll be able to gain out of each of the asset.
How does and this is just a weird question because I hadn't thought about this before, but like how does asset optimization work for a company like WTI, right? Two drivers, you have all this now mapping information, all this artificial intelligence, all this Gen AI stuff is going on. Who knows? In like 5 years, you could have quantum computing being able to tell drivers where to go faster, all this kind of stuff. What role does all of that play? All of these optimizations play in what's happening to a company like WTI?
So ultimately, it is a whether it is Uber or WTI, we will have to do our parts. Uber will have to generate rides by doing the marketing activity and by providing the tech platform. Now, where does our expertise lies. Our expertise lies in the fact that we have to ensure that we provide a well maintained car which has to be driven on the roads and which is able to do 20 trips in a day instead of 10. If I'm able to utilize two drivers on one asset, for example, it is exactly like the way airlines are using the aircrafts. You can have number of one aircraft, but there'll be some 10 pilots or 20 pilots who will be flying those aircrafts around. Accordingly, there are various OBDs, onboard diagnostics. There are various apps which are available as far as the vehicle is concerned. So all that information that we are able to gather, our only effort has to be optimize the utilization, minimize the cost, and that can only happen by driving the car maximum trips, and last, ensuring the customer satisfaction. This is the part that we have to play.
How do you ensure the customer satisfaction part of this? And like, does data play any role in this? Like, what kind of feedback do you get that helps you make the customer satisfied or even know if they are?
So for every transaction, there is whether we are doing it on our platform or XYZ's platform. For every transaction, we have a rating which comes to us. So based on the rating on the remarks, there is a certain ticket is generated based on which we revert to the customer, and if there is anything which we have to take care of. And based on the driver rating, this guy also gets the driver also gets the jobs, not based on any wins and fancies, because there are various algorithms which are defined. For example, somebody's got a rating of 4.9 out of 5, then he will always be preferred over the other guy, and he will be incentivized for that as well, maybe by 1% or 2%, etc., etc. So that's how we are trying to inculcate how best practices are uh, made available to all these drivers as well, and the customer has to report those, because before he actually ends his trip, the customer always gets rating. Yeah, so there's where he has to rate the service accordingly.
So I was always under the impression that the drivers were the ones that the drivers were the ones that were choosing which rides they got. But in the old days, right? Again, my dad actually drove a taxi. It was probably like 60 years ago. This is a long time ago in Boston, right? So he would sit in a I forget what you call it, but he would sit in like one of these hubs. Somebody would call for a taxi. They'd go, Peter, you got to go and get drive and go pick up this guy, and he'd go pick him up. And like kind of the guy who ran the taxi stand would make that decision. My dad had no say in whether he was taking that ride or not. I mean, maybe he argued about it because that was his personality, but he had no say.
So that's how we started our business. That's how when from being a management trainee till the time I become a CEO, we used to do the same thing. But
Right.
now this is being eased by the technology. That's it. There's nothing else. For example, now there are apps which are defining which job has to be given to whom. Before that, a human brain used to work that which job has to be given to which driver. So there's no much difference. Yeah, the human brain can always be very biased because there is no algorithm. However, here there is an algorithm which takes care of most of the things. But by and large, we started like that, and then the logic has been replicated into the algorithms as to how the job has to be split to various drivers based on the price. Also, it is not only about the driver behavior, about the rating. It is about the distance, it is about the time, it is about the behavior, it is about the price which this man is willing to pay.
So you're actually giving, because again, it's my impression when I order a car, and for me, I almost never order a car because I live in a city where the traffic is bad, but I always order a motorbike, and I'm never really going that far, 3 to 5 kilometers from my house at the most, right? If I'm going further, which is generally the airport, I'll get into a car. My thinking was that those cars are just like driving around waiting for someone to give them a ride or waiting for the algo to give them a ride. But you're not suggesting that they're waiting in like a central place. And then if I want to go to the airport, which feels like a plum assignment, that feels like a good assignment, that the best rated drivers then get assigned by the algorithm because it makes them more money. And then they get to take somebody back from the airport as well. Is that how that's happening? Or are they also driving around getting to choose which rides they take?
So if I talk about the entire car rental, which we do, the car rental industry, 40
Yep.
to 45% of the trips are actually airport trips. So most of the cars, rental cars, are used in airport trips only. Rest is within the city and outside the city and intercity. That's how the entire configuration works. But airport trips are always very, very dear to the driver, depending on what kind of customer is going to sit in the car. So if there are 10,000 drivers, there are 10,000 options also who are willing to go to the airport. Because when you walk out of the airport, you can see the amount of, and anywhere in the world, you can see the amount of car rental counters, the limo counters, discounters, the toutings which happen, the radio taxis which are outside, the aggregators. So most of the people will get a ride towards the airport. And till today, most of the companies are trying to find out ways and means of ensuring that if they are able to take some pie of that airport transfer business across the world.
So what is the impact on rent-a-car companies? I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like when I was growing up, if you flew to a new city and you were going to spend like 3 or 4 days there, you would rent a car, right? But do people rent cars anymore? Do companies like WTI and then again through the aggregator just replace the whole rental process with just like UBI, just user-based? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think the business has not gone anywhere. To talk specifically about WTI, we are into B2B space. Initially, when all these aggregators came, there was a bit of threat, but subsequently, our model is a very bespoke model for the customer. Our model is a customer centric model. Whereas when you talk about aggregators, theirs is a driver centric model. They have to sell to the driver. We sell to the customer. Our service is SLA based. As if when you decide that what kind of a car you want, for example, I tied up with Coke, so I'll never be able to put a Pepsi in the Coke's car. Moment that happens, I may lose the entire contract. So it's a very, very bespoke service. There's a face to the service.
Got it.
And that is the reason this kind of service is not going to go anywhere.
No, that's the best kind of business.
Yeah, this will remain. Ultimately, somebody knows this is the number or this is the email ID, call up or on the app, book a car from WTA, there's a face. There'll be somebody who'll respond in case of emergency. So that creates a difference.
Let me just tell you this, a quick story. When I started working at Morgan Stanley, it was the same thing. If I worked past 7 o'clock, they would get me a car home.
Yeah.
And I couldn't call any car company I wanted. I had to call the car company that worked with them. And it was a phone call, 212, whatever the phone number was. And that's the best business in the world because that means that I don't get a choice. I always get a great car. At some point, the same driver is going to pick me up every now and then and take me back to my apartment in New Jersey. This is the best kind of business. You're not even competing with the other aggregators because they're not operating in your space.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Here, now just to give an example and to add further to this, for example, Morgan Stanley, we are servicing Morgan Stanley. In that case, we will dedicate 50, 100, 200 cars only for Morgan Stanley.
Yep.
We will train these drivers only as per their specific needs. And they will know each and every, for example, some 10 times, if one chauffeur has taken you to your place, he knows what Mike needs on the way, where is he going to stop, how it is going to happen. And that is such a comfortable feeling. And
I love it.
Yeah, that's why these companies, B2B is a separate ball game altogether.
Yeah, just so you know, I run a B2B business as well. I would never run a B2C business because there's just too many variables and it's so much easier to give your existing clients unbelievable service because you know what they want. They've been telling you what they've wanted for years. And every time a new consumer comes in, you can't have a standardized product for them per se because you don't know what they want. And, new people are being born every second, right? And their opinions and things change.
Absolutely. Every day there is a new startup. One kid out of the college, they'll come out with a concept. There's somebody who's willing to burn some money there. And ultimately, people like us who have spent maybe 30 years in the business doesn't know what to do. So,
yeah, exactly. So where do you see the future of mobility going, even in this B2B space? Like stuff is going to change, right? But where do you see it going? Or do you just see it or do you just own this space in a way? But that can't even be true because you're right. Stuff changes all the time. Companies change their opinions on things. What do you think? How do you think it's going to evolve? Because in the 30 years you've been doing this, it looks very different today than it looked 30 years ago in some respects. Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, I'm not Nostradamus, but whatever.
No, neither am I.
So whatever little knowledge that I've got, maybe
Stop
imbibed
it.
during all these years, um, three things are going to be really, really important. The first one is sustainability is going to play a major role, and here I'm. So please do not mistake me sustainability with electric vehicles. What I'm saying is any mode of transportation which is more sustainable, be it
Yeah, I got it.
bio CNG, be it electric, be it XYZ, because it is not right to put all the pies in the same basket. That's something which is very important. And I'll give you one example to that. Um Actually, motor, when we talk about vehicles, they are actually motor driven. Motor is something which was driven by electricity. If you go back, all the vehicles were electric. Even I remember there used to be trams in Calcutta and Bombay, everywhere, and these were driven by electric charges because there used to be wire on the top.
Yep.
Some intelligent people came and they said, now use gasoline. And this is not going to work. Now, on what basis they decided this, no one knows. And possibly, if we read between the lines, we know how this must have happened.
Tell me.
Now, after 90 years, there's another gentleman who comes in the world and says, oh my God, this is not working. And you need to go back to electricity.
So why do you think? So why do you think we switched originally from electricity? Like you said, there are wires on the ceiling,
So,
not on the ceiling, in the sky. Yeah.
Exactly what has happened is the lobby for petroleum. Somebody discovered petrol, and what has to be done with petroleum. That's how the entire game changed. Now somebody discovered there's lithium. The entire world is moving toward lithium without even realizing what this lithium is going to do to us after 20 years. And today we are talking about sustainability, and I am a businessman. I will not be able to do anything. If the world is moving towards lithium, I will also be moving towards lithium. But my sense is that I think it is creating a balance of various sustainable fuel, which is more important than just talking electric. Because
I completely agree with you. Look, I did a whole episode with two guys that are building a motor company without using rare earth metals as well. I think it's called Chara Technologies. These are also guys from India for this show. And the point that they were making was you can use all these rare earth metals to make electricity and to do all that stuff. But the reason why they're called rare earth, they told me, is not because they're hard to find. It's because they're hard to use. You only really get to use, like, I think they said somewhere between 3 to 5%. And then the rest is like runoff and dirty and cause pollution and stuff. So that's not even a great solution either in their mind. But you're right. You have to be agnostic because you're not going to build the sustainable thing. And you're right. We can't just think about this as electric vehicles. We have to think about it as sustainable energy production.
Yeah. That's more. For example, even if you talk about uranium, electricity produced by uranium is much more sustainable than all these methods that we're using. And it is very controllable. It is very, very controllable. For example, you have a city which is in the kilometer in a radius of 35 kilometers. You can control it. Solar energy can never be controlled because it is very difficult to store. But the energy which is produced by nuclear has got a different mindset altogether. This energy can be controlled exactly the way we are able to do with the petroleum one.
So there are three big problems with nuclear energy, right? And they all have names: Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and I can't remember the one in India, Bhopal, right? So, but otherwise,
Bhopal it's not because of uranium.
No, it was not because of uranium. But my point is that, like, people still think about it this way, and that nuclear energy is the cleanest, safest, and probably cheapest energy in the whole world.
In the whole world, because you talk about. See, there are so many regulations around nuclear producing nuclear energy. We completely agree with that. But issue is because of this petroleum lobby, and now maybe because of electric lobby, which has happened, we are not really trying to invent anything on that side or implement anything in the city.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm agnostic as long as it's sustainable. I don't want to make the decision on what it's supposed to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the second big thing which can happen is bio-CNG. For example, you must be aware about ethanol and methanol and all this. So there's something called P10, E10, E20, E30, E40. These are various fuel petrol types. E10 means you are mixing 10% of the ethanol with 90% petrol. Moment you are able to bring it to 50% of ethanol and 50% of petrol, that also becomes very, very sustainable to a great extent. When you talk about producing a bio CNG, it is as good as CNG, which has no leftover. So that also can be used. Hydrogen, of course, is in the making, but let's see how much time it takes. So there are various ways and means provided we are wanting to implement it. There are much more bigger powers who are not wanting to maybe implement it because of their own reasons, but then there are a lot of sustainable ways. And India being India, I think from the time I've taken birth and my father had taken birth, we were only sustainable all the time. We were the people who used to use mass transportation, maybe in a capacity of 50 seater, 150 people just get into a bus and that's how they move. So what can
Right.
be more sustainable than that? And to give you one of the best examples is there's a event which is happening in India, which is Prayagraj. You must have heard of it, in Allahabad. At least some 450 million people will be congregating there for this Mahakumbh in a span of 30 days.
Wow.
If this happens in any other country in the world,
Yeah, it's a
the entire
nightmare.
system will collapse. But
Exactly.
so that's the reason I believe God is only in India.
I will say this though. People always ask me, have I been to India? And I have. So I stepped foot in Mumbai, right? But I never really had a long standing Indian experience because I wasn't there for that long and I was only there for a very short conference and I stayed in a super fancy hotel. And again, a bespoke car picked me up and brought me to the event and then brought me back. But we did do a couple of little things and I did feel like there's something different there. I really mean that.
Yeah, the amount of people which are there in that city, can you beat that? And everybody is equal. You will have a fancy car on your right, you'll have some other small rickshaws, cycles, everything on the same road. But I don't know how that, there is still some method in madness. The city is going on.
Yeah, Ashok, I'm not kidding about this, but I drove from the Westin in Mumbai up to another hotel on this kind of back road. And the further we went away from the hotel, which was brand new, it was 5-star hotel, was brand new. The further we went away from it, the more kind of, it was almost like we went into this mystical place.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. And I remember coming home to Thailand and I was like, what was that all about? I don't know. It's kind of amazing. Anyway, I don't want to take up more of your time. Let me ask you this. You've been in this business for 30 years. You've been running your own business for how long now?
15 years.
Wow. What would you tell an entrepreneur today about starting a business? And then I'll let you go. I'm just curious what you think about this whole idea, because I agree with you. We bootstrap everything we do. We've taken no investor money. I don't think we ever will. And frankly, I don't think you need it. But what else should they know?
What we are afraid of, the biggest thing is moment we have too many needs as far as personal side is concerned, we are
Yeah.
always afraid of it. So never increase your needs. That's my first prophecy or advice or whatever you say, if somebody is really wanting it. uh, because moment you have more needs, you'll never be able to take a plunge, because one simple fact is, if you don't have needs, then you're not really bothered about much things. Today, also, my monthly expense is nothing. And people must be wondering that today I can afford to walk in any way there, the way I want to walk, because ultimately, somewhere we have proven a point by even purchasing 14,000 cars. So,
Yeah, exactly.
when I bought my first car, it was stolen on the third day in WTI. And
Nice.
it has been 15 years that we are still fighting for the case, and the insurance company has not paid it. So the first one is never bogged down by all these hindrances which will come in the business. Don't be afraid of taking decisions, because either it will be wrong or it will be right. But once you take a decision, try and stand by it. Most of the time you'll succeed. It is only persistence. So I don't know whether you follow cricket or don't, but
I don't.
you know. So what I wanted to say is, if a person is staying on the pitch, that means if he's there, if he's not getting out, that means he'll be able to score. But
Yeah.
if in the first over he gets out of the pitch, then it makes no sense. So
Yeah.
somewhere you have to make your mind that you have to stand there, burn the bridges behind, don't have any chance of going back. If you have a chance to go back, you'll always fall back on that option. So don't try
Yeah.
to do that. So
I love these two things, actually. Don't have any excessive needs. Don't have any needs, really. Right? You don't need fancy clothes. You don't need a fancy car. You don't need, like, your monthly expenses should be as close to zero as possible.
Yeah.
And this idea of, like, just burning the boats, like, you're going to do this thing, whether it kills you or not, just don't have any fallback.
Exactly. The moment you are able to do this, I think you will succeed. Then, of course, you have to have the team, share the vision. All these things comes in later. How many times you're able to convince your people, how many times you're not able to convince your people, that's all art.
Yeah.
And business is a combination of art and science somewhere, mostly art.
Yeah, mostly art. Okay. I am going to let you go. Ashok Vashist, the founder and CEO of WTI. This was awesome. If you know anybody else great that should come on the show, please let me know. But this was really great. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you. I really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you very much.